hall down there and actually conduct the people's business. And I take my hat off to the folks in the grocery stores. You know, those are not high-paying jobs. It's hard work. You're not on the government of Guam gravy train, but they keep plugging away. And if they decided to stop working, we would be in a world of hurt. Okay, if the members of the legislature stop working, maybe not so much. They're demonstrating right now what a wonderful thing a part-time legislature could be. So going on with the editorial, it's a great reminder that we are not in this alone. Many of us may have lost a paycheck or are doing our best to build protective bubbles around our loved ones who are most vulnerable to this virus. There are just as many out there who are fighting the virus and helping to meet the needs of our community, which is certainly being reshaped. Over the last few weeks, we've seen various people come together to support our frontliners in many ways. From the Academy of Our Lady of Guam class of 1998, or a recent Dan Dorr Professional Development Conference pitch in through PayPal to purchase meals for healthcare providers at GRMC or GMH, to resident entrepreneurs, scientists, engineers who are raising efforts to provide the protective equipment and help those who protect us and our loved ones. These acts of kindness continue to bring out the best in each other. We acknowledge those students and the many people in our community for reminding us that we can make a difference, even if it's as easy or hard as staying at home. So I got a phone call here on line one. Let me finish up this editorial, and then I'll go to Jen. So just hang on, bear with me for a second, Jen, and we'll get to you post haste. Their actions serve a greater purpose of reminding us that we can't allow fear to be the impetus of how our community is reshaped as we move forward. I'm going to repeat that. We can't allow fear to reshape our community. I agree 100% on that one. And that's exactly what our governor apparently is trying to do, reshape our community based on the fear in the community. And I, for one, am very disappointed in what the governor's doing. Okay, going on, finishing up the editorial. We reshape it by making sure we protect and serve the most vulnerable. We do it by supporting the efforts of the Guam Department of Education, Division of Senior Citizens, and many other community programs and efforts to provide meals to our children, manamko, and families in need. And this pandemic has shown us if this pandemic has shown us anything, it is that no one person or entity can do this alone. As Department of Ed fashions a program for distance learning for many of our 30,000 public schools children, as businesses adopt their models, and as residents configure their daily routines, as Tall Tales continues to hold government officials accountable. And that really wasn't in the editorial. I thought it should be, so I stuck it in there. Let's all remember, change can be a good thing, especially when we're making those changes out of care and respect for each other and ourselves. Nice editorial, nice sentiment. No blue star today. Good afternoon, Jen. Hello, Jen.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine, Jen. Can you hear me?
Yes. Good afternoon.
Good. Hello.
I just wanted to express something that came to my attention maybe last night. Our family members, just have passed away, along with his wife recently.
Jen, are you outside with a cell phone?
No, I'm inside.
Okay, I'm getting some background noise there, but go ahead.
Yeah.
I'll see what I can do, okay?
Okay.
A family member passed away last night?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Kindly hold.
Mm,
Okay, I'm still here. I'm
yeah.
sorry about that. Anyways, no, they passed away about a week ago. It was first it was my uncle, then after that was the wife, like a day later. So, coming up will be their funeral, but due to the lockdown and all of this, the coronavirus, they're looking to bury them in the 18th of April.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just because, of course, they get a Christian burial with a priest, but now that they cannot bury without utilizing the church.
Yeah, that's right. And the churches are not open, are they?
Yes.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, Jen.
Yeah. Do you have any?
The
Okay,
call
well,
dropped.
okay. My condolences, Jen. Jen had a death in the family. The burial will be in April. Unable to use the church for a Christian burial. Most unfortunate. Okay, so from there, I'm going to go to the card. I see a long, yeah, I see a long post here from Ishmael that I think I'll read before I plunge into the card. Maybe Jen's calling back. Let me just hang on a second and see. No, it's our Carl. Okay, well, before I plunge into the card, I'll pick up our Carl, who is way ahead of the power curve today, aren't you, our Carl?
Yeah, I'm kind of early checking into Tall Tales. I don't really have anything that profound to say other than that, you
That's
mentioned
kind of
also.
my job, Carl, saying,
I'll leave that up to you.
all right.
But, one thing I found very comforting, when I was reading about the headlines about, the panic buying, I was really starting to get concerned, where this was all going. And then the next day and the day after that, I go to the store regularly, and it was very comforting to go there and not see the shelves stripped bare. I mean, people came in, the stockers came in, and I used to work for, the grocery store chain, the dominant grocery store chain on Island for several years. And it's just comforting to see that, the environment there, seeing all the fully stocked shelves. It just made me feel like, there's some hope in all this craziness going on. I grew up in very, lean circumstances, and I actually think times like this are very good. They're bracing to the nation, and they help us to re-examine our priorities, start to think about what's really important in life. I think it's given a lot of people appreciation for how important our truckers are. The people that truck just millions of tons of goods across the country.
You're not referring to people from the Federated States of Micronesia, are you, Carl?
No, that would be Truckees or Chukis. No, that's something different, Bob.
I had a hard time with that. I used to know where truck was, and I used to know where people from truck were called, and then it changed from there to chook. So for a year or so, I was referring to semi-chooks and pickup chooks and things like that till I finally got it squared away. Anyhow, go on with what you're saying, Carl.
Yeah, I just wanted to register my appreciation for kind of ordinary positions. You're mentioning them. The shelf stockers, in the stores, the cashiers, at the grocery stores. I just find them continuing to be open and having those stock shelves is kind of an ordinary thing during ordinary times. But during these times, it's, to me personally, it's very comforting to go in there and just see this place where life is at least mostly like usual, except for a few less people and many more people wearing masks. But other than that, it's just it's a little bit of normal life.
Yeah, I agree, Carl, and the folks out there in the front line doing the ordinary things on an ordinary basis turn out to be the real heroes now, don't they?
Yes, yeah, and the nurses and the doctors that we don't appreciate very often, suddenly they become more important than the Hollywood crowd. We start realizing. Times like this, I think, are very bracing for the nation. They help us to rethink our priorities and appreciate what's really important in life, family, and some really very ordinary workers that we often ignore, and don't really appreciate, don't think about. But times like this, we begin to realize, they're very special, and they occupy a very special place in our community. They just continue to show up at work and do their job, and I find it very comforting. I go to Payless almost every day, and I'm on a first-name basis with some of them because I'm there so often. But I just appreciate, these ordinary people going to their jobs and just doing them, regardless if they feel like it or they don't. It means a lot to me, and I know it means a lot to thousands of other island residents. We're so disconnected from the supply chain. So to see that supply continue to flow in and go on the shelves, it really is very comforting. Anyway, Bob, that's all I wanted to say. Nothing profound, just a little appreciation.
Well, that was pretty profound, our Carl. We're going to, for today, you are going to be our Carl, our philosopher. So thank you very much for your insights, our Carl. Okay, so our Carl was really early today, and I'm going to once again come back to the heroes at the grocery store compared to the chumps at the legislature who are too delicate, apparently, too delicate to venture out and actually do the jobs that they're getting paid for as we speak. I said I was going to read this long post from Ishmael before I jump into the card, so here it goes. He says, access. In order to have access to information, an individual must have a need to know a security clearance equal to or higher than the information indoctrinated or read into the program and authorized in writing. You, Madam Lupolian, Lou Flu, Hi Lou, Lucellini, Saddam Hussein, Fidel Leon Guerrero. Wow. Do not meet any of the requirements set forth by the Secretary of Defense under the authority of the President of the United States. You, Miss Kim Jong-lu, are in no position to dictate national security policies. Policies set in place to ensure information like this remains secure, so our enemies can't use it against us. What are you looking for? Some press release that states, quote, the Theodore Roosevelt Battle Group is incapacitated due to Wuhan virus, but medics ensure that everyone will be fine within the next 30 days? News like this will definitely have Russia and China at our doors because there is no one there to stop them. You, MAGA hot mess, need to unfornicate yourself and stay in your lane. Well, I know what you're saying there, Ishmael, but it isn't Lucellini that came out with this stuff. It was what I referred to yesterday as the Chamorro Justice Warriors. The 8 community organizations that were complaining about the captain of the of the Teddy Roosevelt making decisions behind closed doors and all that abject silliness. It was them that this criticism actually should be pointed to, and you're absolutely correct. That would be the dumbest thing we could do, would be to publish information about the vulnerabilities of any of our defense capability. You're 100% right on that, but that's who they are over there and I'm not going to call them the Chamorro Justice Warriors anymore. I like the word Chamorro too much to corrupt it by using it on those folks. So from now on, they're going to be the SEP Justice Warriors, the Separation Justice Warriors. But they were the source of the silliness that you so aptly described, Ishmael. Okay, just one other thing here on Facebook that I don't get to comment on very often, and I always envy Roy, I always envy Ray when he is able to say, "We'll always have Paris," meaning that Paris Mendiola Blas is on Facebook right now. So I guess I ought to have a proper salute since Paris Mendiola Blas is actually on Facebook at Tall Tales today. So let's try this. Well, here's looking at you, kid. Remember, we'll always have Paris. If you've seen Casablanca recently, you'll know what I'm talking about. Okay, so back to the card. This is what I've got on the card for today. I've got to spend just a few minutes with the SEP Justice Warriors versus the Navy. Let me come back to the card after this short break here.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Cocoa Coffee Company mugs are now here. Show pride for your island as you enjoy your delicious Circle K coffee. Each generously sized 16-ounce mug is etched with Guam-inspired images like Chief Gadao, Serena, Two Lovers, and many more. The Cocoa Coffee Company mug collection is available for a limited time only, so don't miss out. Get yours today and collect them all. Exclusively available at Circle K locations. A portion of the proceeds go toward the Cocoa Bird Recovery Program.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Security Title, making sure you actually own the property you think you just bought.
And now back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the one radio show politicians don't want you to listen to. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
So, once again, the card. I've got to spend a few minutes here with this separatist justice warriors versus the Navy. Then I've got Helen Meadowbrook versus Lou. I've got Tello versus the Organic Act, Tello versus the legislature, a little bit more of Tall Tales versus coronavirus, Jeff Deist versus the bailout. I talked about that yesterday. Today is going to be my day to be a contrarian, telling you that some of the things that everybody is really excited about may be not such good deals after all, like all of the free money that people are waiting to flow into their pockets as if by magic. Okay, and then I've also got Bavakwa versus history, if I get that far. But the nice thing about Bavakwa versus history is that it never goes away. It's not like a dozen eggs. It doesn't spoil. That is, it doesn't get any more spoiled than it is to start with. But let me start out here with the separatist justice warriors versus the Navy. And I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this, but I'm going to read a list of names here. E hagen famalaan guahan, manhoban para guahan, Guahan Coalition for Peace and Justice, GCC Eco Warriors, and I suppose another name for that could be GCC Environmental Wackos, or Independent Guahan Protehi Litexan, which ought to change its name to Protehi Itrunku. And then we've got Micronesia Climate Alliance, Duck Duck Goose Inc. And this article, it is one of the funniest things that I think I've seen in the last 5 years or so. Those groups apparently sent a letter to the governor telling the governor that she has to, as our chief of state, times like this is a quote, times like this call for a change in antiquated colonial policies that hinder our safety. Now, an antiquated colonial policy is the United States Navy, apparently. Everything about it is an antiquated colonial policy. It is absolutely acceptable for you as our head of state. So these 8 groups have determined that Lou, Ishmael, you might want to add this to your list, that Lou is our head of state. That she demand the U.S. Navy not to be transparent, not only to be transparent, but also include you in major decisions that will impact our island, regardless of our political status. Now, I suppose I could write something as idiotic as this. I'm a pretty clever guy if I've got a pen in my hand, and I can come up with a lot of things. But I would have to probably spend extra time to come up with something as idiotic as that sentence. Our head of state should demand the United States Navy to not only be transparent with you, but also include you in major decisions that will impact our island, regardless of our political status. But the sentence is okay because they use the right word. They use the word colonial. So that's all it takes. So I think, I spent a lot of time on this yesterday and pretty well described what's going on here. The obligatory call from another Joe. I see my light is on now. Maybe another Joe wants to come back and square me away again. Oh, it's our Carl. Wow. Okay, so I'm going to put this down for a second. I'll talk with our Carl, then I'll come back and finish it up and go on with the card. Yes, sir, our Carl, Ferris wheel man.
Hey, Bob. So, I apologize for getting on the Ferris wheel so soon after I already had one round. But I couldn't resist. With your topic, I think I've mentioned to you what I felt was the profound irony of the governor who has recently, with a stroke of a pen, signed away our open government law. Never mind temporary. It shouldn't even be 5 minutes. But signed away our open government law, in effect barring all citizens from any future meetings in the foreseeable future. And then the same governor going to the Navy officials and expressing her outrage and demanding that she should have access to all meetings and have a decision-making power on how they plan the movement of multi-million-dollar carriers and fighter jets in the Pacific. I just find that richly ironic that they would propose that idea.
My first reaction, Carl, when I read it was this: there are about 3,000 joke writers out of work in the United States right now. The people that write for for TV shows and things like that, there are about 3,000 joke writers out of work, and these 8 organizations think they're funny. But go on with your story.
Yeah, I just find it really profoundly ironic. The attitude it seems to convey in her signing away the open government law, and then, if she follows this demand that she, pound on the door of the, the admiral or whoever runs
the pound on the hatch of the
Oh
captain.
yeah, the hatch, exactly.
Yeah, you don't have doors on ships, Carl.
And demand that she have a decision-making power in how they run their mission, their worldwide mission in the Pacific area is just rich. The attitude seems to be open government for me, but not for thee.
Well, the really important thing is where you use the word colonialism and colonizer. So Lou never used the word colonialism or colonizer in her executive order, deep sixing, another nautical phrase there, deep sixing the open government law. So it's probably okay. But the 8 organizations said, we've got to get away from these colonial ideas like captains of ships being in charge of their ships and not listening to every member of the lunatic fringe in every port that they pulled into.
Yeah, I agree. I just had to express my I don't know what you'd call it.
How about chagrin? Chagrin is
that's a good word. Yeah. It's I'm left kind of speechless. And the irony, in all this talk about colonialism, they're trying to make it equivalent to all other colonialism that's happened around the world. The difference with the United States is that when we've entered, I'll read something here that I've been reading recently. In fact, the major wars involving the United States, since it became the world's preeminent military power, have been fought to prevent empires. Nazi imperialism, Japanese imperialism, communist imperialism, and Iraq's attempt at an oil empire. After all these wars, America's territory remained essentially the same. So it's really very, very, very different from the typical colonial empires of the past. America, even after, it goes on to say here, the American century witnessed the fall of, among others, the British, French, and Soviet empires. Normally, the ascendant power fills the vacuum left by the falling powers. We defeated the Soviet Union, but we did not rule over it. We helped liberate Eastern Europe from Soviet overlords, but unlike with the Soviets rule, replacing the vanquished Nazi rule, we declined to exert our will in governing the affairs of those nations. America's example is a historical anomaly, and that's from an excellent book I'm reading called Why the Left Hates America by Daniel J. Flynn. But, for them to try to make America's situation equal to past colonial empires is ridiculous. It's just not anywhere like that at all. If anything, we've gone in the other direction. And we, as supposedly a colonial possession, there are no mass protests in the streets, unlike in Hong Kong, where there have been hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people protesting for months. There's been nothing like that at all.
Ironically, the protesters in Hong Kong display the flag of the United States of America as one of their rallying points. And the protesters in Hong Kong look back at the days of British colonialism as the good old days compared to being under the thumb of communist China.
Yes, they have no interest in being absorbed into that oppressive, brutal, murderous empire, and they've expressed that, and the United Nations has remained stone cold silent about it, which I find extremely hypocritical. And you know my feelings about that. I've expressed them many times. I'll continue to express them about my feelings about Tibet and Eastern Turkestan, or now.
And then we have yesterday, I think I laid it out about how the person in charge of who?
World Health Organization?
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, apparently is in the pocket of the Red Chinese, right? Yeah, who is not on first?
Yeah, he is a former third highest man in the communist rebel force in his home country of Ethiopia. So it's no surprise that where his loyalties would be with a fellow Marxist communist country. There's no surprise in that at all. Anyway, Bob, that's all I wanted to say. Just weigh in my, I guess, what did you say, consternation or whatever you said?
Chagrin.
Chagrin, that's the word. Yeah, it's a head scratcher. Anyway, thank you very much. I sure appreciate it.
All right, Carl. So, I think I'm going to just keep this around for comedy relief. You know, whenever I need a good laugh, I'm going to whip out this article. Community groups. Governor must address DOD closed-door decisions. It's one of the funniest things I've seen dressed up as a serious news story in quite some time. Way to go, 8 community groups. You've really distinguished yourself there. Okay, next I've got a note from Helen Middlebrook that kind of sets the tone concerning a lot of things that I think we need to think about, all of which kind of come back to that question that I've bounced around more than once. Does emergency create power? And if so, can power create emergency? Let's take a short break. We'll come back here for a few minutes before the halftime show.
Brains, beauty, and a lot of power. What more could you want? The new Samsung Galaxy S20 is the phone that will change everything. With revolutionary technology, the S20 will unveil a whole new world for mobile photography by introducing a 108 megapixel camera and an amazing 100 times zoom that lets you find shots that never existed. Come into GTA today and experience a whole new galaxy. GTA, we start with you.
Family Finance has been serving the people of Guam since 1959, and they'll continue to be there for you in the years to come. Whether you're looking to get a personal loan for that summer vacation or paying off those long overdue bills, Family Finance has got you covered. Apply for a personal loan from $1,000 up to $3,600 by calling Family Finance in Agutya at 475-4545, Upper Tumon at 647-5626, or in Dededo, 633-4473. Family Finance, serving the people of Guam since 1959.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Little Carmen there. Okay, so this is a note I got from Helen Middlebrook, an old friend, a very nice lady. I never had an auntie like Helen Middlebrook, but I darn sure wish I would have. Helen writes a column for the Post. I recommend it on a weekly basis, and this is what Helen says. Why is no one yelling about what is happening in this country? We are losing our freedom right and left over what? A virus? Lou's latest move to quarantine everyone who comes into Guam seems over the top. The notice is so poorly written. What does she mean by transit? Does that mean places incoming people have transited through, or does it mean people who are simply transiting through Guam are also getting quarantined? Every one of our finest health professionals is going to get quarantined at a hotel when he gets back on Tuesday night. In the States, I saw reports of checkpoints at state borders. Helen's got a good point. The Rhode Island police set up a checkpoint at their border with New York, and they want to turn away anyone from New York who wants to come into Rhode Island. So, standing back and looking at that for a moment and seeing what comes out of New York, like the likes of the mayor of New York, Bill de Blasio. I don't know, maybe Rhode Island's not so far off base after all. But anyhow, that's Helen's point. And in Howard County, Indiana, the essential stores are being banned. This is really great. Are being banned from selling unessential items because it's unfair to unessential stores that sell the same items but have been forced to close. So now, although you can go to Walmart, you can't buy your kid a new toy in Walmart because the toy stores are closed. So in Howard County, if you are Walmart or any other store that is a grocery store, an essential store, you can't sell everything in your store because it wouldn't be fair to stores that are not essential. You can't make this stuff up. Craft items are also unessential, so I suppose all those ladies wanting to make masks won't be able to buy the material. Yeah, and I read a piece from a constitutional lawyer about due process and how this can't go on in light of the Constitution. But it doesn't appear anyone has read the document lately. The First Amendment has been trashed, and bye-bye number 5 and number 14. Help! We need some seasoned reason from the host of Tall Tales. Well, of course, Helen, I am here to give it to you, and I want to talk about a few things. I'm going to get out the Law and Order notebooks there, Real Joe Cruz. Yeah, I hadn't gone straight to the law when we started talking about the lockdown and the other things that happened. I thought it would be wise to allow the governor to make her case as to why we should be doing the things that we ought to be doing and not rely on a strictly legalistic approach to getting those things done. But, when she took apart the open government law, that was it. That was it for me. Because it makes it too easy for her to engage in other kinds of tyranny. I talk about the slippery slope from time to time on Tall Tales. I saw us already sliding down that slippery slope when Lou did away with the open government law. So here is the statutory authority that she advances for all of these magical powers that she's asserting. I'm going to read first from Executive Order 2020-03. Paragraph 4, and it says, pursuant to Section 19403A1 of Chapter 19, Title 10 Government Code, as were Guam Code annotated, statutes, orders, rules, and regulations that prevent or hinder or delay necessary action to prepare for or respond to this public health emergency, including but limited to purchases and hiring, are hereby suspended. And then in 06 and 07, she did the laundry list of the things that she was suspending pursuant to what I'm going to refer to as Section 19403. And I'm going to read 19403 once again. The declaration of a state of public health emergency shall activate the disaster response and recovery aspects of the government of Guam. Such declaration authorizes the deployment and use of any forces to which the plans apply, and the use or distribution of any supplies, equipment, and materials and facilities assembled, stockpiled, or available pursuant to this chapter. And then A, emergency powers. During a state of public health emergency, the governor may, 1, through an executive order, suspend the provisions of any regulatory statute prescribing procedures for local business, or orders, rules, and regulations of any government agency. So based on this statute that says she can suspend the provisions of any regulatory statute prescribing procedures for conducting local business, she says she's suspending the operation of the open government law. Governor Leon Guerrero, the open government law is not a business. It is the creation of a right in the people of the territory of Guam that you have sworn to protect. It's not a local business. So a regulation prescribing procedures for conducting local business might be something like business license regulations, business sanitary inspection regulations, maybe even some of the tax code, hours for opening and closing, etc. But it's not the open government law. And I have a copy of the United States Constitution here. Like Helen says, this is in my rare books collection at home. If one were to look at, I think it's Article 4, Section... let's see, it's Article 1, Section 10. Yeah, I can't find it now, but there is a section of the United States Constitution that prohibits the abrogation of contractual rights. Let me take a second here. Okay, I have it here. Yeah, Article 1, Section 10, no state shall pass any bill of attainder, ex post facto law, or law impairing the obligation of contracts. So Lou has come along and she said, no evictions. And she said, no foreclosures. Well, evictions and foreclosures arise out of contracts. We'll come back to this right after the big halftime show here. I'm not going to be evicted from Tall Tales. I'm just going to take about a 7-minute break for the big halftime show.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
More testing. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. President Trump telling the coronavirus task force briefing on Monday afternoon.
Today we reached a historic milestone in our war against the coronavirus. Over 1 million Americans have now been tested.
More than 163,000 of those tests coming back positive, and another more somber milestone. More than 3,000 people in the U.S. have died from the virus. The president has extended for 30 days the social distancing guidelines. A similar order from New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo, keeping all but essential businesses closed until April 15th.
It is a mandate. Stay at home. If you're a non-essential worker, stay at home. If you leave the house, you're exposing yourself to danger. If you leave the house, you're exposing others to danger. You can get infected, go home and infect whoever is at home.
More than 1,200 people have died in New York, more than three-quarters of those in New York City. The Navy hospital ship, the USNS Comfort's docking Monday in New York.
The last time the USNS Comfort docked here in New York City, it was just after 9/11 to offer support for first responders. And now she's back offering relief and a morale boost to the medical workers who are overwhelmed by the influx of COVID-19 patients. The USNS Comfort bringing 1,000 beds, 1,200 doctors, nurses, surgeons, and other staff, and 12 operating rooms to handle non-coronavirus patients, allowing hospitals to focus on the pandemic.
That's Fox's Rick Leventhal, who also reports the hospitalization rate in New York State has been slowing, a sign that social distancing is working. But only where it's practiced, the pastor of a megachurch in Tampa choosing instead to preach on Sunday at two different services. Pastor Rodney Howard Brown, charged with violating a public health emergency order. America is listening to Fox News.
Guam is home to strong and resolved people. As an island, we regularly deal with the destructive forces of nature together. We at Security Title know that when the storm passes, our families and neighbors will join together to clear the debris, to barbecue whatever is thawing in our freezers, and get back to the business of wholeheartedly living our lives. As our island struggles with the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, let us remember that this too shall pass.
Today, this is Congressman Nicholas. The federal government is making $7 million in small business disaster loans available for small businesses impacted by the coronavirus. If you would like more information, please contact our office at 671-475-6453 or our local Small Business Administration office at 671-472-7419. You can also email our office at michael.sanicolas@mail.house.gov. God bless you and God bless Guam.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the Office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
The coronavirus ravaging Iran. More than 2,700 deaths. The U.S. offering to help, but Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says.
Sadly, the Islamic Republic of Iran's regime, the leadership, has rejected those offers of humanitarian assistance from us here in America. It's really unfortunate for the Iranian people.
Secretary Pompeo says the U.S. is trying to get as much data on the virus from all countries and is sharing what we know as well. Federal judges Monday temporarily blocking efforts by Texas, Alabama, and Ohio to ban abortion during the coronavirus pandemic, handling Planned Parenthood and other abortion providers a victory. Clinics across the U.S. filing lawsuits to stop states from trying to shutter them during the outbreak. In Minnesota, an act of kindness in the midst of a pandemic.
The woman was driving a little too fast, so a state trooper pulled her over. She turned out to be a cardiologist, Dr. Sarosh Ashraf Janjua. Not only did Trooper Brian Schwartz let the overworked doctor off with just a warning, he went back to his patrol car and brought out a fistful of in short supply N95 medical masks issued to him for his protection and gave them to her because he felt she needed them more. Gary Baumgarten, Fox News.
President Trump's bid to shield his tax records was to be argued before the Supreme Court today, but it will not happen.
The Supreme Court announced a little over 2 weeks ago that it is postponing upcoming oral arguments due to the coronavirus pandemic, including 3 cases set to be argued today concerning President Trump's bid to shield his financial records. The court in a statement said the postponement of those cases and others because of the spread of the virus is out of an abundance of caution. The court said it will examine the options for rescheduling in light of the developing circumstances. As things stand, the last argument day for this session of the Supreme Court is on April 29th. John Decker, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
As we stand up to coronavirus by standing back with social distancing, Bank Pacific reminds you that you can come to the bank without going to the bank. Use many of our other delivery platforms like online banking at bankpacific.com, accessing cash at our ATMs, shopping with our debit cards. For businesses, we have secure cash and check drop windows, and we are employing a new smarter mobile app with remote deposit capture in the next few weeks. We're all in this together, and together we will win. Bank Pacific. Brothers but branches, we place roots. Member FDIC.
Still want your burger fix but practicing social distancing? Have no worries. Mezcla's got you covered. Both Mezcla Dos locations are now accepting takeout orders. Please visit them online at mezclados.com for the complete list of their menu. Call their Upper Tumon location at 646-6295 or Lower Tumon at 647-6296 to place your order. Team Mezcla is here to serve you your favorite burger meal. Mezcla, a true taste of Guam.
If you've ever struggled for breath, you know what a scary experience it is. Whether you have asthma, emphysema, COPD, lung cancer, or another respiratory illness, the right medical treatment makes all the difference. GRMC's Pulmonology Clinic has the latest technology and respiratory equipment, staffed by world-class pulmonologists. Make an appointment today with GRMC's Pulmonology Clinic and start breathing easier. GRMC, where patients are partners.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
So here we are back again after that beautiful halftime show that we all enjoy so much. I had a chance to peek at Facebook during the halftime show, and I noticed that the reach of our international radio listening audience now extends all the way to Argentina. As I have a poster here named Javi Morua from Argentina. So,
I have many friends from the old country in Germany who live in Argentina now.
Under assumed names, no
Yes,
doubt,
sir.
right? Yeah. Right. So, yeah, Javi Morua from Argentina. So I'll just have to say, ¿Qué pasa, Javi? Bienvenidos and Tall Tales. And let's see, what else have I got here? I've got Armando and Andrew Camacho never disappoints. A SEP justice warrior might find his sore posterior as solid as gravy, confronting the Navy and challenging an aircraft carrier. Yeah. Okay. And then we have Andrew coming back again. Governor Lou, with her strident guffaw, has trampled and torn up the law. Open government? Who needs that? I'm fighting a Wuhan bat and don't have time for all this hoopla. Very good, Andrew. And then Pam Duvall says that laughter from the daughters is elaborate jumbo, raising us to statehood and calling the ruler of all Guam as queen of the island. Well, we don't have a queen. I guess the closest we could come would be a governor, right? Well, she is our head of state, according to the Crazy Eight. The 8 organizations, better known as the Crazy 8. And then Pam Duvall agrees with me when I talk in terms of this interpretation of Section 19403. The government of Guam is not a private company. So using a little legal vocabulary here, Section 19403 is a very slender reed upon which to support the all of the suspending that the governor has done. She's making 19403 doing some very heavy lifting that I don't think it's capable of. So I think that if I can keep mixing metaphors here for a while, when it comes to the governor's legal authority to suspend all these things she says she's suspending, it's clear that the emperor, or in this case, the head of state, has no clothes. In other words, it just isn't there, but no one around her is going to step forward and say, Lou, you don't have the authority to do that. Okay, along the same lines here, I go next to Tello versus the Organic Act. And before maybe I'll start with Tello versus the legislature. And I've got a nice piece here from a website called Law and Liberty. And the title of the article is Virtual Democracy, an Institutional Plague. Okay, and this guy starts out disagreeing with Jonathan Turley, my favorite columnist, because over the weekend, Turley opined that the coronavirus pandemic necessitates the adoption of virtual democracy. Well, his argument begins with the coronavirus crisis. There is more than a little hint of, quote, not letting a crisis go to waste. If Rahm Emanuel never does anything else in his whole life, he'll get credit for that phrase. Turley claims that there are no good arguments against virtual government aside from knee-jerk opposition to anything new. I think he's talking about me there. And that the Constitution's framers, many of whom were enamored with technological developments, would have approved. The present crisis may necessitate some extremely limited exceptions to our in-person government. But there are very good arguments against the innovations Turley proposes, and in no way clear the founders would have approved of them. Some founders may have been interested in new technological developments, but this in no way indicates they would approve of virtual government. They approached constitutionalism with more subtlety than a simple new versus old binary. The founders considered how operations of institutions might either exacerbate or ameliorate the corrupting tendencies in popular government. The corrupting tendencies in popular government. The corrupting tendencies are there. They've always been there. They always will be there. We can't wish them away. And because of the corrupting tendencies, I was extremely angry when I saw that Lou said that boards and commissions don't have to comply with the open government law anymore. The open government law is a strong antidote to the corrupting tendencies in popular government. And then there's a little bit more here about the founders, which I'm just going to skip over. And the massive time-sensitive coronavirus stimulus package, for instance, has to overcome significant partisan differences, not to mention some brazen attempts to hijack it. Breakthrough in the Senate came only after 2 straight days of late-night face-to-face meetings. Imagine a similar situation when members of Congress are all in their home districts. Does anyone really think such negotiation would be effective over a conference call? I don't think so. Remote, and then here's something else. A guy named Philip Wallach recently noted, remote voting threatens to turn representatives into simple mouthpieces capable of expressing the unfiltered views of their constituents, but largely incapable of genuine deliberation. This turns the role of the legislature into simple, quote, preference aggregation. Real person-to-person discussions can force representatives to put aside the intractable partisanship that is so easy to adopt from hundreds of miles away and work with other flesh and blood humans to solve problems. Congress was intended to be a whole that is greater than the sum of its parts, not simply a vote-collecting body that could work just as well on an app. And the reason I read that, I don't think that I'm going to have as much influence over the United States Congress as I should have. That's unfortunate, but it's a fact. But as far as our legislature is concerned, banish this silly idea of a virtual legislative session. Now, I've heard Tello this morning talking with Ray on the Real Joe Cruz AM show, talking about, yeah, we've got it all set up, you know, how we're going to do the virtual session. I can't remember the name of the application they were going to use. Can you?
Zoom.
Zoom, yeah, we got it all set up for Zoom. This is as dumb an idea. Maybe you guys could join the Crazy Eight, because you seem to be capable of having your own dumb ideas. I read this article to point out that if the legislature has to meet face-to-face in a real live flesh and blood session, this doing it online, doing it with Zoom is not a substitute. It will not lead to good government. It is one of those things that, what was that phrase that I had? Corrupting tendencies in popular government. It will be a fine petri dish for corrupting tendencies in popular government. The legislature has to meet in an actual face-to-face, flesh and blood setting. And talk about a slippery slope. If the legislature ever got the idea that they didn't have to meet in a real session, they would never meet in a real session. And the reason is that when at least this current crop and an awful lot of other people who have been elected to the legislature pick up a copy of the legislature dictionary. And when you look in the legislature dictionary, the definition for the word better is this: easier. You know, it would be a lot easier if we could just stay home and do this online. Then I wouldn't have to come downtown. I wouldn't have to change clothes. No, it's just a bad idea. A legislative session should be something special, not something that you do online with Zoom. Now, I'm not just some old-timer here that doesn't like to change. I am that, of course, but here's what the law says. If anybody down there at the legislature is at all concerned about the law, and judging from some of the stuff you crank out, I think that's a doubtful proposition at best, but here is the appropriate section of the Organic Act. 48 United States Code, Section 1423B. The legislature shall be judge of the selection and qualification of its own members. It shall choose from its members its own officers, determine its rules and procedures not inconsistent with this chapter, and keep a journal. Now, here's the key part. The quorum of the legislature shall consist of a simple majority of its members. Quorum, simple majority of its members. So there are 8 members and 15 members in the legislature when everybody's alive. A simple majority is 8. So you got to have 8 people on the session floor if you're going to do business. No bill shall become law unless it shall have passed at a meeting. I didn't see anything in there about Zoom. online, etc. It says passed at a meeting at which a quorum was present by the affirmative vote of a majority of the members present and voting, which vote shall be by the yeas and nays. So you have to have a meeting. A quorum has to be present, and the matter has to draw the votes of a majority of the members present. So 8 people can do it, 5 could pass a bill, but they got to be there. They can't be at home working on their phones and saying, "Oh yeah, there was a meeting. I was on my phone, but I logged in, and there was a quorum present because 9 of us were online, so there was a quorum present there, and a majority. We had the affirmative vote of the members present. They were present online. How anyone could even consider meeting with Zoom as meeting the requirements of this section of the Organic Act it should be beyond anyone. It's not the law. It's not a good idea. And I come back again to what our Carl was talking about here, about the folks who work in the grocery stores. The folks who work in the grocery stores are every bit as susceptible to infection with the Wuhan virus as you prima donnas at the legislature. And I suspect some of them are even more susceptible because when I go to Payless, I see people that are in their 60s. I don't know anybody down at the legislature. Well, since 10 of them are, I'm going to be really sexist here, since 10 of them are females, even if they were 60, they wouldn't admit it because a woman never likes you to know her age. Now, I expect to come out and find my tires flat after a remark like that, Real Joe Cruz. So the folks at the grocery store, they can come to work every day. And, of course, if they don't come to work, I don't know what Payless's sick leave policy is, but I suspect if they don't come to work sooner or later, they're not going to get paid. The prima donnas at the legislature are drawing their checks, no problem. We found out that Tina Rose Munya Barnes, the speaker, went to Saipan one day instead of calling a special session. She got paid for that day, even though she wasn't in town, she wasn't at the legislature, and she ducked out of her duty of calling a special session. So the law doesn't allow for it. And if you are so bullheaded, prima donnas, that you want to go forward with this, then you are enabling anyone who doesn't like the application of any law that you pass a really good challenge. Because you disobeyed, if you pass a law in violation of 1423B, it very well could be a nullity. So get this virtual meeting out of your head. Get this Zoom idea out of your head. And I don't expect everyone in the legislature to be a lawyer. In fact, that might not be such a good idea. But I do expect that everybody in the legislature can read. And that before you even raise your hand to be sworn in, you should read the section of the Organic Act that deals with the legislature. And you should read the standing rules, and you should at least read the table of the contents of Mason's book on legislative procedure. You know, there's no on-the-job training to be a senator. You got to know what you're doing when you start. Okay, so I see that you opened up the Joe line. I've got another Joe on the line here. Good afternoon, another Joe.
Yeah, goodbye. I'll tell you, this is very entertaining in times when we're stuck at home, it's quite an education, Uncle Bob. So earlier, Ray Gibson was talking to the former Speaker Cruz. I'm hoping he runs for some position in either the legislature or Congress. Either way, I think we can get more, more of his advice alongside you with regards to these issues that you're bringing up. And I think the people maybe stay in line more and not push the envelope so much in directions that it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what you're saying is the whole basis of why these policies and laws are put in place. So he was also talking about his disappointment at our experiments with the economy with the gambling, and it seems to me that we're making the same you're doing the same lesson over and over. This is entertainment, and they're looking at it as a cash cow. Really, the cash cow has been tourism and military, the basis, stimulating the economy. So, these are things that we should pay attention to. Now, of course, we don't want to put all our eggs in one basket, and this coronavirus thing is evident of that, because look at our emphasis on tourism. Now we have to think carefully. Are we going to follow the same management strategy in regards to tourism, or do we have to adjust? I think worldwide, everyone's going to have to make adjustments to their management, tourism management. So, having said that, Uncle Bob, I have to think to myself, what is it that these liberal-minded people, and believe me, I have a lot of relatives who are liberal-minded, because I have a lot of relatives who are educators, and
it follows.
And I'm sorry.
It follows. Yeah.
And so, what do they do at the end of the day? They want to just unwind and watch a good soap or a good pilot. And for the decades, has been. You want to talk about technology implemented in the government? When you want improve a technology, improve office, go paperless, that sort of thing. I have to point to Star Trek and Bob, because talking about NASA and space exploration, and so I have to ask the question: if we did explore space, and we did have to pass laws regarding space, and we did have lawmakers traveling in space, how would they achieve a quorum? While on Earth, of course, I agree with you. There needs to be a physical, flesh and blood quorum, because how do we know the lawmakers are not under duress to vote a certain way? They're not being unduly pressured or threatened. But now back to the other question is it or is it too much of a distraction? Are we making ourselves space cadets, thinking, oh, we can do all this stuff by video conferencing? I mean, if we do go into space more, Uncle Bob, we are going to have to ask that question, posing whether we have quorums. And the last thought I wanted to bring up was with regards to the vote, the quorums and vote in the legislature. Wasn't there something in place, electronic vote, through the years?
No. What may confuse you there, another Joe, is that a lot of states have electronic tabulation of votes. So in a larger House of Representatives, instead of calling the roll, aye, etc., a senator would have a switch on his desk, aye or nay, and he'd flip that switch, and it would light up a board behind the speaker. In other words, just a different way of tabulating the votes, but it's not distance voting. And another, Joe, you mentioned Star Trek and technology. So I'm prepared to use a little Star Trek technology right now. Imagine me being at the legislature with all 15 of them there. And I've got, what was that communicator thing that Captain Kirk had? It was just a communicator, wasn't it? First thing, set your phasers to stun.
I'm stunned. Yes, I'm stunned.
All right, and then I've got my communicator here, and I say, beam me up, Scotty. There's no intelligent life down here.
Okay. Okay, Bob, thanks. I'll just keep listening now.
All right. So much for Star Trek. Yeah. So the fact that we have it, the fact that we, well, let me take a seventh inning stretch and I'll come back here to Star Trek.
Everyone has a busy schedule these days, and sometimes we forget to schedule our routine dental checkup and cleaning. Don't neglect your dental health. Schedule one today with Dr. Robert Yang and his Smile Team, conveniently located at the East West Business Center on Marine Drive, Upper Tumon. Call us today at 647-8702 or 3. Again, that's 647-8702 or 647-8703. We make smiles happen.
Cocoa Coffee Company is now available at Circle K. Single origin coffee beans carefully sourced and locally roasted to give you the freshest cup of coffee Guam has to offer. Grab a cup that's brewed every 30 minutes or purchase a bag of the locally roasted whole beans. Flavors now serving: light medium roasted Ethiopia and medium dark roasted Jamaican Blue Mountain. Exclusively available at Circle K. With every Cocoa Coffee Company purchase, a portion of the proceeds will go towards the Cocoa Recovery Program.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Mezcla. Both Mezcla Dos locations, upper and lower, are open from 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. daily for takeout service and curbside service. Check them out and give them a call. Upper Mezcla Dos, 646-6295. Lower Mezcla Dos, 647-6296.
So here we are, a virtual entry into the center field bleachers at Wrigley Field in Chicago, Illinois. I was talking about Star Trek just before we did the seventh inning stretch and technology. We have some wonderful technology that we're not using. And then we have this overpowering desire to use it where we shouldn't. Lulu doesn't want to have the open government law in place, and Tello is talking about the legislature meeting in Zoom instead of having a real session. Now, that takes me back to something I talked about yesterday in Executive Order 2020-07. The governor has taken it upon herself to empower the legislature to have a virtual session, a Zoom session, which by itself ought to cause everybody down at the legislature to gather a big bucket of rocks and take it down and throw them at the windows at Adelup. Adelup has no business whatsoever telling the legislature it can have a virtual session or can't have a virtual session or anything else. I'll read that same section again, 1423B, Organic Act. The legislature shall be the judge of the selection and qualification of its own members. It shall choose from its members its own officers, determine its rules and procedures not inconsistent with this chapter, and keep a journal. Determine its rules and procedures. There's nothing in here about the governor determining the rules and procedures of the legislature. That's up to the legislature so long as they are consistent with the laws of Guam and the Organic Act. But the governor stuck her nose in and said the legislature can meet. There's no requirement that the people in the legislature meet physically. And if you read the whole executive order, it could all be done electronically, except that one person would have to be at the legislature, and that would have to be announced. What a crazy idea. First of all, a crazy idea that the governor would get involved in the legislature's business, and second, that the governor would give them such a crazy idea as to how to conduct their business. So, beat me up, Scotty. There's no intelligent life down here. It is like an episode from Star Trek where we've got we don't have the Klingons, we've got the Legons and the Govons, and coming up with these crazy ideas as to how to conduct the business of our government, not yours, our government. Now, as far as technology is concerned, the technology is there to provide for a really much better government than what we have. We talk about transparency a lot. And given the technology that we have, the government ought to be completely transparent. Anybody ought to be able to sit down at a computer and go into all of the books and accounts of the government. Every single penny. We ought to know where every single penny is, where it came from, how it's spent. Every penny of it. It's all technologically possible. That way, and instead of having to deal with the guru of government finances, whose name is Lester Carlson, who inhabits that rare kingdom called the Bureau of Budget and Management Research. Oh, you can't do that. BBMR has to approve it. Well, what process does BBMR use? Well, they're BBMR. So we should be able to look at all of the books that Lester Carlson has access to, every single one of them. And every single board and commission and legislature meeting ought to be streamed online, and it ought to be archived so that if you couldn't watch it in real time, you could go back anytime and it would be there. That's all possible. If we weren't horsing around with silly ideas like doing away with the open government law, and we ought to do just exactly the opposite. It ought to be that everything that boards and commissions do is online, recorded, archived, etc. And the minutes have to be available forthwith. So, nice chat with Ray this morning, Tello. I mean, the fact that you were really dead wrong apparently was not a handicap for you to carry on a nice chat. Now, along the same lines here, I have to talk a little bit about the legislature and what's going on at the legislature, or what's not going on at the legislature, I guess is better, because the legislature is still on strike. You'll recall a couple of weeks ago when Talina Nelson had a bill that would provide for some sort of unemployment compensation, and wrote a note to the Speaker, Tina Rose Mooney Barnes, saying, let's have a special session here so we could deal with this. Tina wrote back and said, we're not having a special session. We're not going into session for quite some time. Well, the minority started making a little noise, and I suspect others did. So then Tina said, okay, all right, we'll meet on Tuesday. That's today. But on Monday, the governor wrote to Tina and said, apparently using the same pen that she used to pen that executive order telling the legislature how to conduct its business, she wrote a note to Tina, you don't need a session. It's not necessary. And Tina, to her credit, I don't know. You can't tell whether a person clicks clicks their heels when given an order just by looking at the papers. But apparently Tina clicked her heels and said, okay, we're not going to have a session today. Now, in the meantime, senators have introduced bills, and that's what senators do, in case we've forgotten. Senators introduce bills. Senators communicate with their constituents by means of the bills that they introduce. Now, I know that the folks over there at the legislature would think that what I just said is heresy. Senators communicate with their constituents by introducing resolutions and having fancy presentations. Those bills pay no attention to that. So there is a cache, C-A-S-C-H-E, a cache of potentially meritorious bills waiting for the legislature to deal with. But Tina will not allow the legislature to meet. And of course, the Wuhan virus is a wonderful excuse. Oh, we can't meet because of the Wuhan virus. Now, I'm not going to go back to the grocery store comparison again, but there's nothing stopping the legislature from meeting in person in accordance with the Organic Act and dealing with the legislation that has been introduced, the bills that have been introduced. And if there is a reason not to go forward because similar initiatives may be on the way from Washington, the way we deal with that is in a legislative session where we discuss these things and make a legislative decision. Right now, we've got two dictators. One dictator is called Lou Leon Guerrero, who has decided what sections of the law she doesn't like. And the other dictator is Tina Rose Munya Barnes, who said, we're not going to have any legislative sessions. I don't care what you guys want to do. No sessions. What part of no don't you understand out there, you senators? So we're in the grips of a dictatorship. If there are reasons not to go forward, then those are the kinds of things that should be hashed out on the floor. And I'm going to give you an example of why it's so important to do that, going back to the United States Congress in just a minute here. If I can find my papers.
GRMC's cardiology department treats most complex heart problems. In our catheterization lab, cardiologists use imaging equipment to treat clogged arteries that can cause heart attacks or heart failure. We perform balloon angioplasty, stenting, and other life-saving cardiac procedures. If you suffer from a heart condition, have your provider refer you to GRMC's cardiology clinic at 645-5500. GRMC, where patients are partners.
If you own a Toyota, please listen to this. It could help you avoid injury, maybe save your life. The Takata airbags installed in certain Toyotas can explode and shoot out sharp metal fragments at people inside the vehicle. You don't need to be in a collision. They could explode any time. In the U.S., these airbags have caused 26 deaths. There's been a worldwide recall of Takata airbags, and most have had the faulty parts replaced. But here in Guam, there are still over 3,000 Toyotas on the road with potentially lethal airbags, and yours could be one of them. So please, take your Toyota to Atkins Grow, even if you didn't buy it from us, and get the inflator replaced. It costs you nothing, it takes just about an hour, and it could save a life, yours or someone you love. The AK song says we're here for life. That's never been more true.
At Atkins Grow, we're here for life.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
So here we are, Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky, the home stretch. And one of the most popular jockeys in the horse racing business is climbed on another mount. And he's going to be riding in his third race today. Wearing the green and white silk, our Carl. Best of luck to you, Carl. I hope you win the race.
Hey, Bob, thanks for taking me on a third round on this Ferris wheel. I was listening to your comments as I was driving around, and I got home, and I really wanted to call you because you were mentioning that there is the technology today to be able to post spending information online. There's actually an organization called OpenTheBooks.com. that is their whole mission. They have a web page. Their byline or their tagline underneath Open the Books is every dime online in real time.
I saw a video the other night about from a guy from Open the Books. Pretty persuasive.
Yeah, and you know there are companies. They call them open books companies, where the employees who work there, the management has voluntarily given them access to look at the books and see, what exactly is there. Their income, their outgo, their revenue, their the whole 9 yards. They can look at it anytime they're in the mood for it. And of course, there are employee-owned companies all across the United States. The United States is actually the ultimate employee-owned company. We own and we pay for the company. So we should have access to it, to all the spending information instantly when we want it. And with the Internet, that is becoming real. And this open books concept needs to come to Guam.
You know, Carl, when I said that it is technologically possible to do that right now, I wasn't talking through my hat. Because if you were to go to a website called bobsoffice.org, you would find spreadsheets there and graphs that show how every single cent that senator spent over 4 years, exactly how it was spent, where and how, every penny of it. Now, that goes back to 2003 to 2006. And we've come a long way with technology since then, but it was possible then. It's possible now, but I suspect that most senators, and it could start at the legislature, I expect that most senators would rather gargle with turpentine than let you see how they're spending their office budgets with any detail.
Yeah, absolutely. They would like to keep that, not all, but most of them would like to keep that secret, and because I'm sure that there's some embarrassing expenses there. But, that doesn't matter. We finance the government. We, the taxpayers of Guam, and also the taxpayers of the United States. It's all financed by taxpayers, and we deserve to know where every penny goes. And
well,
I look forward
then
to the day when
we had this situation where we had a $29 million collection in excess of what we thought we were going to collect. And you remember that senators said, well, you can't spend that money unless it's appropriated. And the director of BBMR, Lester Carlson, said, oh, no, it's deficit reduction. And we never really found out what was going on, where the money was, how much there was there, and what accounts that money would be applied to. And that stuff, that should all be online, easily accessible by anybody who can get to a computer.
Yeah, I agree. That's we're the ultimate employee-owned company. We're not actually employed by the government, but we finance it. We're stockholders in this company, and we deserve to have access to the books on a moment's notice. And I look forward to the day when this OpenTheBooks.com concept comes to Guam. And when we finally return to our sanity and return to a part-time legislature, as 41 states have done.
I think that until that happens, all the rest of the things are going to be hard to come by because the legislature is going to have to deal from the moral high ground when it straightens out the executive branch. And the legislature is not on the moral high ground right now. In fact, it's hard to, the way they're operating now, it's hard to know if they're even on the ground. They may be in some hot air balloon floating around somewhere because they certainly aren't doing their work.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I appreciate your show. I appreciate the efforts of Ken Leon Guerrero, the Vigilance Committee, Troy Torres, and other disruptors, because if not for people like you and those people, I would really have very little hope for Guam. But they give me hope that that with time, we're going to be able to change things and make the government truly accountable, not just in a catchy, what do you call this, political slogan, during election year, or during the months leading up to election. But in reality, we're not there yet, but we're headed in the right direction, I believe, with people like you. Okay, Bob, thank you very much.
Okay, it's good talking to you, Carl. And I know you'll stay tuned for the last 9 minutes or so. We're heading down the home stretch here. I wanted to spend just a few minutes talking about the necessity of parliamentary bodies actually meeting and in a workmanlike fashion doing their jobs. And I'm going to use the United States Congress as an example. And I'm going to present one of my newest heroes here today, a gentleman named Thomas Massie. Thomas Massie got everybody mad at him, including Donald Trump, because when the House was getting ready to vote on the stimulus bill that the Senate had passed, Thomas Massie said, "I want a roll call vote." Now, if you listen to Tall Tales, you know that the Senate often, the House often disposes of its business with something called unanimous consent. The House has a Rules Committee, and what the Rules Committee does, it negotiates rules as to how various matters that are coming before the House will be handled, how much time will be devoted towards debate, how the bill will actually be handled. And if the Rules Committee says that a matter can go on the unanimous consent calendar, then when that part of the agenda comes up, if no one objects, then a bill is passed. There's no roll call, there's no aye or nay or anything. Passed by unanimous consent. And I scolded Representative San Nicolas, our representative, by saying that his war claims bill had passed the House unanimously, when actually it had passed the House by unanimous consent. Big difference. So what the House had planned on doing was taking this bill that the Senate had passed and putting it on the consent calendar, and the presiding officer, probably Nancy, wouldn't have wanted to show up. A member who is the acting presiding officer calls the House to order, calls the number of the bill and says, is there unanimous consent? And if nobody objects, he gavels, he says the bill is passed. Now, I think what they thought they were going to do, they were going to finesse it, because the United States Constitution says that there has to be, I probably should have found this before I started here. Article 1, Section 5, each house shall be the judge of its elections, returns, etc. And a majority of each shall constitute a quorum to do business. So a majority of the members of the House is 435 divided by 2. 212 or something like that. The real Joe Cruz is the mathematical whiz of the House here. So no quorum, no business. You got to have 213 people there to even do unanimous consent. Now, most of the members, many of the members weren't in the District of Columbia. They were home. And so in order to have a session, there would have to be a quorum. So I think what they thought they would do, they would just slide it under the radar. No one would challenge. No one would say, Mr. Speaker, I challenge the absence of a quorum, and they could go to the consent calendar and pass it, and that way no one would have to come back to Washington, or very few. But when Massey did what he did, then there was a lot of griping and complaining because enough of them had to come back to make a quorum. And when that happened, they wouldn't let Massey speak, and he had a lot to say because there were some real flaws in that bill. So it's kind of the same thing that we're seeing here. You know, well, if we got a good excuse, we shouldn't have to come. Just because we're members of the House of Representatives doesn't mean that we should have to come to the House of Representatives to do something. We'd much rather stay at home. Coronavirus, Wuhan virus. And it turns out that and here's another wrinkle that that no one thought of. You know, that this is the same section of the United States Constitution, Article 1, Section 7. All bills for raising revenue shall originate in the House of Representatives. Well, the bill that passed raises all kinds of revenue, but it didn't originate in the House of Representatives. It originated in the Senate. And the reason was, you'll recall that Nancy had her own bill in the House, and she filled it so full of environmental wacko stuff and Green New Deal and other progressive things that even her own members didn't like it very much. So it didn't go anywhere. So then the Senate originated a bill to do this so-called bailout. And one of the things that happened along the line was that 4 Republican senators said that the bill could not pass in its current form. That was Lindsey Graham and, let's see, who are the other 4? And the reason that they said that the bill shouldn't pass is they wanted to amend it because the unemployment provision that was in the bill would have meant that in some states, people would be paid more money in unemployment that they had earned on their jobs when they were still working. And what's his name wanted to fix that, along with a couple of senators named Scott. But the Byrne came along and said, you can't do that. It's better to pay them too much than not at all. And if you proceed with that amendment, I'll tie this thing up for 2 weeks. So they let it pass. That's why we have to keep an eye on anything that calls itself a legislative body. We got to keep an eye on it all the time. And that's exactly what I'm going to keep doing here on Tall Tales. And I'll do it tomorrow. So make sure you're on the air on Facebook listening in tomorrow. I'll see you then.